like potato, and I like patata. You like tomato, and I like tomato. Potato, patata, tomato, tomato. Oh, let's call the whole thing off. But
Hello everyone, and oh my many days, what a few weeks it has been. Upon finishing my master's degree in September, I went on a cheeky little holiday, and while standing in a cathedral in the middle of Malta with a thin sort of apron around my legs to cover my knees in the house of God, a new video dropped on Mike Boyd's channel where a girl learns to whistle.
Do you know that? That's so good! Yeah. Everyone uses Uber in London though, so it's a completely useless skill.
That girl was this girl, aka Sophie, the woman. Yes. And so I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Mike for letting me do a video on his channel, and also a big hello to everyone who's hopped over from his channel to come join me over here. Hi, it's so great to have you here. It's a really exciting time for me at the moment because it is the first time in the history of this channel that I haven't had a full-time job or a full-time master's degree that I'm doing alongside the channel. So let's see what happens. But yeah, I'm just buzzing to have you all here really. Now, it's pretty safe to say that I've never had as many comments on a video as I have on the video that was on Mike's channel. And despite a lot of advice from my friends and quite a large proportion of the internet not to look at them, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna have a little scroll. And I'm happy, a little bit surprised to say that they were generally pretty heartwarming. I mean, there was some variation in that, like, there were some telling me that I just can't do this. And there were some lookalikes, some of which I hadn't heard before and was quite interested by, some of which I had heard before, and I admit to. And then nestled within all of the comments, there lay an absolute gem. Where are you from? Your English just sounds disgusting. Just sounds disgusting. Just sounds disgusting. And you know, as I read this, it made me wonder why. Why does my English just sound disgusting? And this is what I've worked out. Surely it's actually sexy. When starting out my research, the first few bits of evidence I came across were actually contradictory to this commenter's view. A Time Out dating survey from 2015 considered 11,000 responses from 24 different cities. When asked which accent they found the sexiest, the outright winner with a whopping 27% of the vote was the British accent. Dip my hat. Now, we have to appreciate that these results are going to be a little bit skewed. Like, yeah, they asked people in Hong Kong and Kuala Lumpur and various places, but the majority of responses came from London, Paris, New York, Chicago and LA. The fact that these results might not be totally accurate also comes out in the fact that the American accent was voted second sexiest with 8.7% of the vote. That beats the Irish accent by 8.6%. I'm sorry Americans, but there must be something amiss there because that Irish accent is pretty hot, but not when I do it. Also, the survey was carried out in 2015 and a lot of things have changed since then. Not least, Brexit has become an ongoing shambles that I'm sure has made the British sexiness fall through the floor, much like the value of the pound. But still, traditions hold great power, and everything from Love Actually to Taylor Swift's London Boy, which I cannot believe I'm referencing for the second time in 2 videos, speak of the value of a British accent in romantic conquests. But of course, as anyone who's watched even a snippet of Love Island UK knows, the UK is full of loads of different accents. And that's the problem with the sexiness reputation. You see, you're expecting something like this. Terribly sorry, I just seem to have fallen undeniably in love with you. When in reality, it's just as likely to be, shut your bloody mouth and leave me alone, you little scrote. But how do different accents develop? When we're born, we have the potential that we could make and understand all the sounds of all human languages. As babies, the world is just one blooming, buzzing confusion to us, as philosopher William James puts it. But the more we're exposed to words and language around us, the more this blooming, buzzing confusion starts to organise itself in our heads. and in terms of language, the sounds that are important in our language start to stand out. And this is how accents across countries form. When we learn to ignore sounds that don't matter in our language of choice, then it becomes harder to voice them as we get older. Take German as an example. As a native English speaker, I might say the phrase, "I wish this." But because in German the w and f sounds aren't as common, then a German speaker who's speaking English might say, "I wish this." Vice versa, Germans might say,
Das Kätzchen ist müde.
which means the little cat is tired. No. Whereas I, as a native English speaker, would say something like, Das Katzen ist müde. I never make the k or the ch or even the u sounds, so I'm not really saying them right. I don't think I was even really saying them right then, to be honest. So that's why native and non-native speakers of different languages have accents. And it can also offer a partial explanation as to why there are accents across English-speaking countries, such as Australia, America, and the UK. But what else causes accents within a language, or within a country? After all, this journey of self-discovery is to find out why my English in particular just sounds disgusting. How did this come to pass? How can one country have so many accents? Much like languages themselves, when learning to speak, we're going to inherit the speaking style of the people we're learning from. So obviously, as we're growing up, your accent is going to be heavily influenced by the surroundings you're growing up in. And different communities have different accents, because what may have begun as a subtle change has self-perpetuated over many, many generations. People within communities generally speak with the accent of that community. A community can be a wide local area or as small as the family you live with. But what generally happens is that the voices from all these different communities tend to merge together to form your voice. Your voice therefore acts as a signal to show what groups you're a part of. It's like a label or a flag to show where you belong. And this role of accents in group identity comes out all the time. We're constantly changing how we're talking depending on who we're talking to, sometimes subtly, sometimes less so. And this is known as linguistic accommodation. Was that a fancy linguistics phrase? I think it was, and it was linguistic accommodation. But I'm not a fancy linguist, so I'd probably just call it accent blending. I do this all the time as someone who is originally from the north of England and then went to uni down south and then popped back north for a bit but now lives back down south. When I return to the north of England, my true homeland, I find myself ramping my northernness up. Not loads, but noticeably. I do it especially at the hairdressers. I'm not sure why, because I don't think I particularly belong in the hairdressers. But this is because I feel such a strong connection to the north and I'm a desperate people pleaser, so I want everyone there to know that I'm a part of their community, as labelled by the accent. So accents are all about community and identity, and essentially they originate from isolation, because if you think about it, before the days of planes and phones and FaceTime in that order and the like, then there was no way that we could connect these isolated communities, and so the self-perpetuation of accents in those communities was in full flow. And in fact, we can see the impact of migration during these less connected times on accents that exist today. Britain set up many colonies in Australia, for example. I mean, we set up many colonies everywhere, but for this example, Australia. And so the typical English-speaking Australian accent shares many qualities and characteristics with a London accent. Like a London, Australian, London, Australian. Am I just doing the same accent? I think I am. Closer to my home, Corby is a town in the Midlands of the UK that's been dubbed Little Scotland. This is because some Scottish people moved down in the 1930s to work in the steelworks, and so now there's a little hub of people with an English accent with a slight little Scottish twang. So that's how accents developed, but now we're more connected than ever before and all that, we get more exposure to all sorts of different accents. And this has meant that certain accents have gained certain reputations from people who don't speak them. For example, mine is disgusting. So why do different accents have different reputations? When I said just a few seconds ago that we all get more exposure to accents these days, there are some people that are gonna get more exposure than others. Because if you have an accent that's considered as the norm or the more acceptable version of your country's voice, then that accent will be more prevalent. And so you'll be less likely to hear more unusual ones, especially when you're younger. Let's bounce over to the USA for an example of this, because I know you'll all be feeling left out. A study in 2012 investigated how children from Chicago and children from a small town in Tennessee responded to people with different accents. Groups of children that were 5 to 6 years old were shown pictures of people and then played an audio recording of that person talking, and the person spoke with either a northern US or a southern US accent. The kids were then asked if they would want to be friends with that person. Oh, isn't it cute? So what happened? Well, the Northerners, aka the Chicago kids, overwhelmingly selected their fellow Northerners as their potential friends, whereas the Southern kids, aka the Tennessee kids, didn't really show any preference. Those are weird results, right? And what's more, when asked to pick which people they thought would be smarter, nicer, or more in charge, the same results were found. Northern kids picked Northerners, Southern kids showed no preference. But why is that? Like, I can see why the Northern kids might prefer the Northern people, but why aren't the small town Southern kids also picking Southerners? Well, much like a career on YouTube, it's all about exposure, or at least that's what the people who did the study suggest. Now, I feel like me talking about American accents is gonna open up a lot of comments telling me I'm wrong, but this is what I got from my research, so let's see. In America and the surrounding world, from what I believe, a North American accent is the more general, common American accent. So Northern accents were familiar to Northern and Southern kids, because the Southern kids had had exposure to it from all sorts of media. However, when it came to the Southern accent, the North American kids were a bit more unsure about it because they just hadn't heard it being spoken as much, and so they were a bit more wary of individuals who spoke in this unusual way. Is that interesting? I thought it was a good little study, that. And I've been intrigued to hear of a similar study in the UK, because here the compass kind of flips, and it's a particular brand of Southern accent that is the kind of media accepted one. Although I will admit, I feel like telly people have been making an effort to have more unusual accents, so well done to them. The UK standard is generally known as Received Pronunciation, or RP, but it's also more recently become known as SSBE, which stands for So Super Bloody English, but also stands for Southern Standard British English. So this is the kind of accent that carries social prestige with it. Think Emma Thompson or Patrick Stewart. People with an accent like this are often ranked highly for things like self-confidence, intelligence, and job status. All non-SSBE accents are generally put under the umbrella term of regional accents. And of course, if you've given SSBE all these boosted characteristics, then that opens the door for the regional ones to be given opposing negative stereotypes. Areas that have been historically associated with industrialisation and unemployment are still battling these stereotypes today, and these are locations that also tend to have strong regional accents. So you can see how the standard Southern British English and the regional accent dichotomy is starting to separate. And as shown with the study in the USA, the less exposure you have to people with these different accents, the less likely you are to see that they don't always fit the stereotype, and so your socially embedded assumptions persist. However, for these accent stereotypes to affect your views of people, you need to be aware of the stereotype in the first place. There was a study way back in 2003 that investigated this, and it was based at the University of Birmingham, probably because the poor Brummies in Birmingham had something to prove that their accent isn't stupid. That impression of their accent was very stupid, so. People were asked to rate 20 different accents on how much they liked them, and these accents included Southern Irish, Welsh, Scouse, and Brummie. People from Birmingham. Native English speakers ranked Irish highly, whereas the other three, Welsh, Scouse and Brummie, came quite low. Now, as a Brit, this is kind of predictable. Even though I like all the accents, it does not surprise me that those three come near the bottom. However, non-native English speakers provided very different results. They rated Welsh up at 2nd, Brummie at 3rd, Scouse at 6th, and Irish right down at 10th. What happened to that sexy Irish accent earlier then? Right down at 10th, what is that about? And the University of Birmingham got its revenge, because the often mocked Brummie accent was described by non-native English speakers as cool, beautiful, and sexy, amongst other words. So well done, Birmingham. I'm gonna believe you and just assume that your study wasn't very, very biased, because you guys really need that win. So although this kind of proves that accent-based stereotypes are just based on cultural feedback on what we're meant to believe that people from certain places are like, stereotypes do still persist. And in summary, in the UK, people with regional accents, although generally considered a bit more friendly because they're not from the big city, are also generally considered a bit less intelligent. Although it's also worth pointing out that the prevalence of the Southern Standard accent and the stereotype that they have a stereotype of Northerners has given them the stereotype that they are stuck up and posh. It's just like a stereotype cycle, like, come on guys, let's peace and love, what about that, And so it's no surprise that to avoid these stereotypes, people turn to linguistic accommodation or accent blending, as I mentioned earlier. But this accommodation can be turned into a more permanent change. Accent softening is where people have learned to tone down their accent to a more neutral one. And from everywhere I've looked, it always seems to be in the direction from regional to standard rather than like hyper posh to standard. And there are actual courses that you can go on where you learn to do this to your voice. Courses that say things like, as a native regional speaker, you may feel that you are treated differently because of social stereotyping associated with your accent, and want it to be more neutral? I wasn't expecting a question mark there, but there we go. You may want to simply soften or reduce some of your accent characteristics in order to be more universally understood and speak with more ease and confidence. I'm sorry, but there's nothing like telling me that I'm speaking wrong to make me speak with less confidence. I mean, come on, what happened to the benefits of individuality? I mean, I'm sure it's useful to some people, but it's useful to some people because this weird hierarchy exists. I mean, I shouldn't criticise them too much because accent softening is exactly what I did, and I didn't even take classes in it. My accent has always been at the posh end of Northern, especially to my Northern mates. There's a kind of general neutralisation that comes along with middle classness, and I definitely have a bit of that. I mean, I was and still am Northern, don't get me wrong, but I've never been super Northern. Before I carry on, for context, here's a brief clip of my voice before I went to uni.
It just goes that F thing from, what is it? I'll do anything. Then G, then A. So it's like...
When I went to uni in Oxford, my accent got noticeably more like a standard Southern British accent because of the people I was hanging out with. Oxford University students are mainly from London and the surrounding areas, and to be totally honest, they're mainly from a few certain schools in London and the surrounding areas, #T, but we're not going to get into that now. The point is that these were the voices that I was surrounded by. Pretty much all of my friends were middle class, and so there was that accent neutralisation for non-Londoners where we'd all learnt to make our voices more palatable. And in my first term, I also got nodes on my vocal cords, which made my voice husky. All of these different factors came together and resulted in me coming home to my friends saying, "Sophie, why'd you sound like a posh man?" So there we go, I've worked it out. Thank goodness, a weight off my shoulders. Now I know why my English is disgusting. My base accent is Lancastrian, i.e. I'm from Lancashire in the north of the UK, and so I say certain words in a non-received pronunciation way, such as short A's in grass and laugh and bath, rather than saying grass and laugh and bath. This means I'm disgusting because it is not what you would expect a proper well-rounded British accent to sound like. But I've also had my accent softened a heck of a lot by spending plenty of time down south. And this means I'm disgusting because I'm altering myself to benefit from the class system. Not to mention that I've picked up quite a few other habits that make my English disgusting, like saying sick unironically, and I've started saying babes unironically too. And I also have a husky voice, which should be a positive, but it's also disgusting when you catch me after a night out and I sound like this. But at least now I know why I am the way that I am. All I can say is a massive thank you to the comment that inspired this video. Like, you've really taken me to some places. Those places are Corby, a small town in Tennessee, and Chicago. And thanks again to everyone who's hung in through however many minutes of my disgusting English this has been. You are the true heroes of our time. Like this video if you like it, share it if you share it, subscribe it if you subscribe it, and tweet me if you tweet. Also comment if you want to do that. I want to hear all about your hodgepodge of an accent. Is it more disgusting than mine? I simply must know. Throw down your gross voiced gauntlets in the comments below. Meanwhile, all that's left to say is thank you so much for watching. watching, have a lovely day, and remember to keep asking questions. Hi guys, here's the summary. Pause it and read it if you want, but do bear in mind that this video has now changed and I actually am really for accent softening. I've been to a few classes now and I really think it's really top notch. It's quite out of this world. It worked out well, didn't it? I actually wanted to do a video on accents anyway, and then I got that comment. I was like, zing. Here we go, here we go. Oh, I've never had so many issues with this bit before. Came out that the sexiest accent was the British one. I mean, there were some telling me that I can't do this, which I can't. Sorry, that's Southern pigs. They weren't pigs. They're children. Shut you bloody. What are you laughing at? Okay.